I don't even know where to start because this story is basically my whole life. It feels like one of those things people wouldn't believe unless they lived it, but here we are. When my mom remarried, I was around 12. My dad wasn't really in the picture. He had dipped out when I was a toddler, and my mom raised me mostly on her own until she met him. Let's just call him Tom. At first, Tom seemed decent. He was charismatic, good with words, and he made my mom feel like she was finally getting the stability she'd always wanted. He also had a son my age, Jake. The first few months weren't terrible. We were all figuring each other out. But the shift happened quicker than I could process. The day Tom officially moved in, he made an announcement like it was some corporate restructuring meeting. He told me that Jake would be taking my room, the only real space I'd had growing up. He looked at me and said, "You can take the attic. You don't deserve comfort." Jake's been through enough. I just stood there, stunned. My room wasn't fancy or anything, but it was mine. My posters on the walls, my books, my little desk where I drew. The attic wasn't even finished. It had insulation showing, barely any heating, and a tiny window that let in more cold than light. I turned to my mom, waiting for her to say something, to defend me, but she just gave this weak smile and said, "He's right, honey. His child deserves more right now." That was the first time I realized I was going to be treated like a guest in my own house. Jake settled in easily. He got my room, my bed, even my shelves. I got pushed upstairs into what felt like a storage box. That first night, I cried myself to sleep under a blanket that barely kept out the draft, listening to Jake laugh downstairs with my mom and Tom like they were already a perfect little family without me. Over the years, it got worse. Jake was fine, I guess. He wasn't cruel in the way you'd expect, but he also never stopped them when they put me down. If anything, he liked the attention he got at my expense. Every family dinner turned into a roast session where Tom would call me the burden kid, and my mom would giggle along like it was some inside joke. Jake got praised for literally everything, scoring average grades, showing up to soccer practice, even just existing. Meanwhile, if I brought home straight A's, they'd say, "Well, that's the least you can do since you're not good at anything else." When Jake failed a year in high school, they decided he needed tutors. Guess where the money came from? The savings account my grandmother had left me before she passed away. I had been holding on to that money with the dream of using it for college. I remember begging my mom not to touch it, and she just said, "You'll be fine without college. You're smart, you'll figure something out. Jake needs this more than you." I felt like my chest was caving in when I heard her say that. It was like she had already decided my future didn't matter. By the time I turned 18, I was desperate to get out. I worked 2 part-time jobs just to save enough to move. When I finally landed my first real job after years of grinding, they didn't even congratulate me. Tom sneered and said, "Probably just a charity hire. Companies love to check off their diversity boxes." My mom just nodded like it made sense. The kicker? At every family gathering, they still posted online about their perfect little family. Pictures of Jake holding certificates, Tom grilling in the backyard, my mom smiling like she'd hit the jackpot. I was either cropped out or never included. And yet, when people commented things like, "You must be so proud," they'd respond with, "We're beyond blessed." Meanwhile, I was just the attic kid, the one they didn't acknowledge unless they wanted to tear down. By the time I was in my 20s, I had built a life for myself outside of them. Friends who actually cared about me. A job that gave me independence. And eventually, I met the person who would change everything, my fiancé. When I introduced him to my family, they laughed right in my face. Tom said, "He must be settling. No one would choose you on purpose." My mom smirked and added, "Be grateful someone even wants you." I'll never forget the look on my fiancé's face that night. He didn't even respond to them. He just squeezed my hand under the table while I smiled through my humiliation and said, "At least he knows my worth." It was the first time I said it out loud. I have worth. And I meant it. I didn't cut them off right away. Part of me still wanted my mom to wake up and realize what she'd done. But instead, the years that followed only proved how little she cared about me compared to the family she built with Tom. And one day, when the tables finally turned, they were the ones begging me not to do what they had done to me. But that part comes later. Adulthood felt like freedom, but also like a scar that never healed. I moved out the moment I had enough money to cover a deposit on a crappy one-bedroom apartment. The place had peeling paint, drafty windows, and a bathroom sink that leaked, but it was mine. No one could tell me I didn't deserve it. I threw myself into work. Maybe part of me wanted to prove them wrong. Maybe part of me just needed something to drown out the noise of my past. My job wasn't glamorous at first. Entry level, long hours, bosses who barely remembered my name. But it was steady. Slowly, I worked my way up. I built a reputation as someone who got things done, who paid attention to detail, who wasn't afraid to grind. And still, whenever I shared good news, I got nothing from my mom or Tom. I remember calling to tell her about my first promotion. She cut me off halfway and said, "That's nice. Did you hear Jake got his learner's permit? We're so proud of him." I just sat there in silence, holding the phone like an idiot, wondering why I even bothered to tell her anything. I kept most of my distance, but holidays were the one thing I couldn't escape. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, I'd get the same cold treatment. Jake would sit in the living room bragging about whatever minor thing he had accomplished, and my mom and Tom would beam at him like he had cured cancer. If I mentioned my job, they'd roll their eyes or say things like, "Well, jobs come and go. Stability matters." The stability they were talking about was Jake, who by then had failed out of college after one semester. They brushed it off, saying, "College isn't for everyone." Meanwhile, I was pulling 60-hour weeks to prove myself in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. The real slap came a few years later. I found out they had borrowed money against what little inheritance I had left, again, all in the name of helping Jake get back on track. He wanted to try starting a business. It failed within 6 months. They never paid me back. When I confronted my mom, she said, "You don't need it. You're doing fine. Be happy for your brother." Brother. That word stung every time. Jake wasn't my brother. He was Tom's kid. He'd never once treated me like family. We coexisted. That's it. But to her, blood meant nothing if Tom was involved. By then, my fiancé was in the picture. We met through work. He was a consultant on one of the projects I managed. He was steady, patient, and for the first time in my life, someone looked at me like I wasn't disposable. When I told him about my past, about the attic, the savings, the insults, he didn't pity me. He just said, "That's not a family. That's abuse." He wanted to meet them eventually, though. He said he couldn't really understand until he saw it himself. So one Christmas, I brought him along. Big mistake. The minute we walked through the door, Tom started sizing him up like a rival salesman. Jake smirked, made some snide joke about finally bringing someone home before it's too late. My mom pulled me aside and whispered, "Don't get too attached. He's probably using you for something." Dinner was unbearable. They ignored him most of the time, except when they took cheap shots. Tom said, "You could have done better," right to his face. Jake laughed like it was hilarious. My mom said, "Well, at least someone finally wants her. Be grateful, sweetheart." I wanted to sink into the floor. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just squeezed his hand under the table. He didn't flinch, didn't snap back, didn't let them see him sweat. After dessert, when we got in the car, I started apologizing, but he stopped me. He said, "You don't need to explain. They showed me exactly who they are. And you know what? At least I know your worth." That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because of them, but because someone had finally said the words I'd been waiting to hear my whole life. I cut back on family visits after that. Birthdays? Skipped. Random cookouts? Didn't show. I still called my mom sometimes, but each conversation was shorter, colder. She never asked about my life, only updated me on Jake, his jobs, his girlfriends, his endless string of second chances. Then came the wedding planning. I knew they wouldn't be supportive, but part of me still felt obligated to invite them. My fiancé told me it was my choice, that we could have a wedding without them if that's what I wanted. But I sent the invitations anyway. Their RSVP came with a note scribbled on the back. "Of course we'll be there. We wouldn't miss seeing who's willing to settle." I stared at that card for hours. My mom had signed her name with a little heart at the end, like it was some loving message. I realized then that she wasn't blind to how cruel it was. She chose it. She always chose Tom and Jake over me. I started to think about everything they'd taken, my room, my savings, my dignity. And I wondered, for the first time, if there was a way to make them face the consequences of what they'd done. I didn't know it yet, but the opportunity was coming. The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And in a lot of ways, it was, but not because of my family. If anything, they made it harder. They showed up late, for starters. Everyone else was seated, waiting, and my mom, Tom, and Jake came strolling in like they were celebrities. My mom wore a dress that looked suspiciously like it was meant for a bride, white lace with sequins, as if she wanted people to confuse her as the center of attention. Tom smirked at the guests like he was inspecting his next batch of clients. Jake, of course, was sulking, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The ceremony itself was beautiful. My fiancé, my husband, now, looked at me like I was the only person in the room. But when we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, I caught Tom whispering something to Jake, and Jake chuckling. Later, I found out they had bet on how long our marriage would last. Jake had said under a year. Tom had given us 3. My mom laughed along with them. During the reception, they acted like they were doing me a favor just by being there. Tom toasted, "To the poor guy who doesn't know what he's gotten himself into." Jake clapped like it was the funniest thing ever. My mom leaned over to one of my cousins and said loudly enough for me to hear, "I give it a year. She's never been easy to love." I should have thrown them out right then and there. But I didn't. I told myself, this is the last time. After today, they won't get another chance to ruin something for me. And I stuck to that. After the wedding, I went low contact. I didn't block them outright, but I stopped answering most calls. Holidays came and went. Sometimes they'd send a group text with a picture of Jake holding some meaningless certificate, captioned, "So proud of our boy." Nothing about me. Nothing about my marriage. Nothing about my promotions at work. I stopped expecting it. Meanwhile, life with my husband was everything I'd ever wanted. He believed in me in a way no one else had. With him, I built a home that felt warm, safe, and mine. No attics. No scraps. I finally had comfort I was told I didn't deserve. Then, a few years later, I heard the cracks starting to show in their perfect family. Jake had burned through another job. He bounced from retail to delivery to some half-baked startup Tom tried to fund, but nothing stuck. Every time, they framed it like, he just hasn't found his passion yet. Meanwhile, I was climbing steadily, moving into management, taking on bigger projects, and making a name for myself. I didn't flaunt it, but word got around. People in the extended family started noticing. At gatherings I skipped, my cousins would mention my career. Apparently, it drove Tom crazy. He would say things like, "Anyone can get promoted these days. It's not real achievement." My mom would agree. Jake would sulk in the corner. One Thanksgiving, I decided to show up, just to see how bad it had gotten. My husband warned me not to, but I was curious. I wanted to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. We walked in, and the energy shifted immediately. My mom plastered on a fake smile. Tom looked me up and down like I was a stranger. Jake muttered, "Well, look who finally showed." At dinner, Tom asked about my job. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was being genuine. So I told him about a project I had just finished, something I was proud of. He laughed. "That's not real work. You're just pushing papers." Jake could do that if he wanted to. Jake smirked. My mom nodded. My husband squeezed my hand under the table again. But here's the difference. This time, I didn't shrink. I didn't smile through it. I looked Tom dead in the eye and said, "Funny, since Jake had my college fund and still couldn't finish high school, maybe you should have saved the money for someone who could have used it." The table went silent. My mom's face tightened. Tom looked like he wanted to explode. Jake turned red. I didn't wait for their response. I stood up, grabbed my husband's hand, and walked out. That was the last time I sat at their table. After that, I stopped answering calls altogether. Months went by, then years. The only updates I got were through whispers from cousins or Facebook posts. Jake still couldn't hold a job. Tom had blown through savings trying to prop him up. My mom kept pretending online that everything was perfect, posting old photos with captions like, "So grateful for my boys," always excluding me. Then one day, out of nowhere, my mom called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear what excuse she had this time. She didn't even say hello. She just started crying. "Please, you need to help us. Jake's in trouble. We're in trouble." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to her sob. All those years of being told I didn't deserve comfort, didn't deserve college, didn't deserve love. Suddenly, she was begging me like I was the only person who could save them. That's when I realized the power had shifted. I wasn't the attic kid anymore. I wasn't the burden. I had built a life worth something, and they were the ones falling apart. What she was begging me for, that part comes next. The night my mom called, I didn't pick up right away. I let it go to voicemail. But when I listened back, her voice shook in a way I had never heard before. "Please, please call me back. We need you. Jake needs you. Don't turn your back on family." The same woman who once told me I didn't deserve comfort now begged for mine. I didn't call back that night. I sat on the couch with my husband, replaying her words until they didn't sting anymore. They sounded almost pathetic. All those years of cruelty and indifference. And now she wanted me to swoop in like some savior? The next morning, curiosity got the best of me. I called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Oh, thank God," she said. "It's bad. Jake's in real trouble." I stayed silent, waiting for her to keep talking. Apparently, Jake had been working for a family friend in construction. Instead of actually working, he'd been pocketing money from side jobs, inflating invoices, and taking loans from clients that weren't his to take. He got caught. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. People were pressing charges. Fraud? Theft? Whatever you want to call it. It was serious. Tom had tried to bail him out, but their finances were already shot. They had mortgaged their house twice, drained retirement accounts, and maxed out credit cards trying to keep Jake afloat. Now they were facing not just criminal charges for Jake, but financial ruin for themselves. My mom said, "We thought, maybe you could help. You're doing so well. You have money. You could talk to your company, maybe get him a job, vouch for him in court. Please, he's your brother." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A sharp, bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop myself. "He's not my brother. He's Tom's son. And you made it pretty clear a long time ago where your loyalty was." She started crying harder. "Don't say that. You're still family. You can't just turn your back on us." I let her cry. When she quieted down, I said, "Funny. That's exactly what you did to me." And then I hung up. For weeks after, I kept getting calls. Tom tried once. His tone wasn't begging. It was more demanding. "You owe us. We raised you." I almost choked. Raised me? They shoved me into an attic, stripped my savings, and mocked me every step of the way. That's not raising a child. That's using them. I blocked his number. Eventually, the calls stopped. But then, months later, I got a letter in the mail. A subpoena. They wanted me in court. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. But no, Jake's lawyer wanted me as a character witness. My mom had given them my name, saying I could prove he wasn't the bad person people were painting him to be. I nearly tore the letter in half. But my husband calmed me down. "Go," he said. "Not for them, for you. Let them see who you are now." So I went. The courtroom was nothing like the family dinners where I'd been laughed at and humiliated. Here, the tables were turned. Tom sat stiffly in a suit that looked a size too small, his confidence cracked. Jake slouched beside him, pale, eyes darting like he was waiting for someone to save him. My mom sat behind them, tissues balled in her hands, mascara streaking her face. When they saw me walk in, it was like their last hope had arrived. My mom mouthed, "Thank you." But when I took the stand, I didn't say what they expected. The lawyer asked me to describe Jake's character. I told the truth. I talked about how, since we were kids, I'd been treated as lesser so Jake could be praised for mediocrity. How my savings were stolen to fund his failures. How every opportunity I'd earned was mocked while every failure of his was excused. How he'd grown up believing rules didn't apply to him because his parents cleaned up every mess. I didn't embellish. I didn't rant. I just laid it out plain and simple. By the time I was done, my mom was sobbing into her hands. Tom's jaw was tight, like he wanted to throttle me, but couldn't. Jake wouldn't even look at me. The judge thanked me for my honesty. I stepped down, and for the first time in my life, I felt taller than all of them combined. During recess, my mom tried to corner me in the hallway. She grabbed my arm, mascara streaks making her look like a ghost. "Please, don't do this to us. You're destroying your family." I pulled my arm back. "You destroyed me first." Her voice cracked. We had to prioritize Jake. He needed more. I looked at her, this woman who had given away my room, my savings, my dignity, and I said, "No, you chose him. Every single time. And now you're living with that choice." Tom joined her, trying to puff himself up like he still had authority over me. His voice broke when he said, "We're begging you. Please, don't do this to us." I stared at them, and for the first time, I wasn't scared or ashamed or desperate for their approval. I was free. "I don't have to do anything to you," I said. "You did it to yourselves." I walked away before they could say another word. The court didn't go in their favor. Jake ended up with probation, fines, and a permanent record that basically killed any chance of a respectable career. Tom and my mom lost most of what they had trying to cover legal fees and restitution. Their perfect family facade crumbled. Meanwhile, I walked out of that courthouse with my husband beside me, my head held high, finally unburdened. And that's when I realized the attic kid was gone. Forever. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping out of a prison I hadn't realized I'd been living in for years. The weight I'd carried, the shame, the self-doubt, the desperate craving for their approval, just evaporated. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the kid in the attic. I was an adult who had stood her ground, told the truth, and walked away with nothing to regret. After that, I went completely no contact. I blocked every number, every social media account. I told cousins and extended family that I didn't want updates and to respect my boundaries. My mom tried one last time. She sent a long email about forgiveness and healing as a family. But every word dripped with the same manipulation she'd used my whole life. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she say, "I was wrong. I hurt you." Just excuses and pleas for me to save them. I deleted it without replying. Meanwhile, my life blossomed. My husband and I built a home, one filled with warmth and laughter, not insults and cold shoulders. We had friends who became our chosen family, people who celebrated us instead of tearing us down. I poured myself into my career, not to prove anything to them anymore, but to honor the kid I used to be, the one who deserved comfort, love, and respect, but never got it. The years rolled by. I stopped thinking about them most days. I'd occasionally hear through the grapevine about Jake's misadventures, another job lost, another girlfriend who left after realizing he had no ambition, another financial scheme gone wrong. Tom's health started failing, and without the cushion of savings they'd once had, medical bills piled up. My mom kept posting old pictures online, pretending everything was fine. Smiling family portraits from years ago, always without me. Captions like, "So proud of my boys. Family is everything. Family is everything." The irony burned, but it didn't break me anymore. The final twist came years later. By then, I had a house, a career I loved, and a marriage that only grew stronger with time. We weren't rich by billionaire standards, but compared to where I started, I felt wealthy beyond belief. Not just financially, emotionally, spiritually, in every way that mattered. Then one evening, I got a letter in the mail. Not a subpoena this time, just a desperate handwritten note. The handwriting was shaky, almost unrecognizable, but I knew it was my mom's. "Please, we have nothing left. Jake can't support us. Tom is sick. I'm begging you to help us. We're your family. Please don't abandon us now." I stared at that letter for a long time. A younger version of me, the attic kid, the one who used to beg for scraps of kindness, might have folded, might have thought, "They need me. Maybe this is my chance to finally belong." But the person I'd become? She knew better. I didn't respond. I tucked the letter away in a box with old report cards and childhood drawings, relics of a life I'd outgrown, proof that I survived them. A few weeks later, I ran into a distant cousin at the grocery store. She filled me in without me even asking. Tom had passed away. Jake had moved back home because he couldn't afford rent anywhere else. My mom was living in near poverty, relying on food stamps, clinging to the illusion that Jake would somehow turn it all around. "Did they ever try to patch things up with you?" my cousin asked gently. I thought about the courtroom, about my mom's tear-streaked face as she begged, "Please, don't do this to us." About all the years she'd let Tom mock me, let Jake take everything I had, let me rot in an attic while she smiled for photos of her perfect family. "They tried," I said finally, "but it was too late." And I meant it. Because here's the thing, closure doesn't always come from an apology. Sometimes closure is realizing you don't need them anymore. Sometimes it's standing in the wreckage of what they built without you and knowing you didn't cause it, and you don't have to fix it. The last time I heard about them was through that same cousin. Jake had been arrested again, this time for DUIs. My mom had shown up in court, sobbing, just like she did when I told the truth years earlier. But this time, there was no one left to stand up for him. No savings to drain. No one to bail him out. And me? I was home, curled up on the couch with my husband, watching some dumb movie, drinking hot chocolate, laughing so hard I cried. That's when it hit me. The attic kid, the burden they tried to erase, had built a life worth living. The perfect family they paraded around online had crumbled into nothing. Poetic justice doesn't always come with a grand finale. Sometimes it's just this: living a life so full of love, stability, and self-worth that the people who tried to break you can only watch from the sidelines. begging for scraps they once denied you. When my mom wrote, "Please, don't do this to us," I realized she was never talking about me destroying them. They destroyed themselves. All I did was walk away, and I never looked back.